Well, we're not going to talk about Mexican history because
Why
I was
not?
trying to introduce you as a candidate for alderman.
Oh,
You're going to
thank
run
you.
for alderman
Yes,
again,
sir.
Ward
Yes, sir.
7.
Alderman Ward 7.
And can you tell me, Annie couldn't, what is the origin of the word alderman?
Well, it's German, I'm pretty sure. Alder, I believe, means old or elder, like an elder man, like
Niet.
they. So,
Nine.
nine?
Nine.
No?
It comes from the alder bush, the alder tree, excuse me.
Okay.
The alder tree was considered sacred by the Celts that were all in Northern Europe. So they used to have town meetings in Germany, and of course, who's invading England all the time? You
The
know,
Germans,
Angles, Saxons, Danes,
the Jutes.
and they would have a branch of the alder tree because it was sacred. And like you know how if you watch the house when it starts, they have that mace,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
fasces,
yeah.
which is, and they would walk in there with the alder branch, and they became aldermen.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a
And
German, like alder, elder, like an elder,
it's just
like your
like
elder.
why is 32 degrees Fahrenheit freezing and 33 degrees? That's the clue. 33 degrees quickening. It's Hermeticism. You know, like Masonic degrees, 33 degrees, the occult knowledge, Hermetic knowledge. Fahrenheit is really ridiculous, and Celsius, it makes
sense. Yeah, 0 degrees is freezing, 100 degrees is boiling.
Right, that makes sense, right?
Well, you know
But
what?
32 degrees
I
is
work in
freezing?
healthcare. In healthcare, science
Celsius.
has rejected the American system.
Of course.
So scientists use the metric system for weights and volumes and everything and temperature. We don't use the American system anymore in healthcare, and I'm pretty sure the rest of science doesn't.
Yeah, we were supposed to go to the metric system in 1971. We were supposed to do a 10-year transition.
I remember when Carter tried to do it too.
No, it was Nixon that signed
But I mean,
that
Carter
bill.
tried to also do it. I
Because
thought.
he tried to keep it going, but nobody wanted it. One of the things it would have done is make our cars slightly more competitive, because you didn't have to make cars for two different markets, you know. Because most places like Canada, you know, they used to have kilometers and miles, not just kilometers.
I remember
But
that.
Ross Terrio, before we get to Aldermanic Committee recommends folding cash in senior center into health department, why don't you look at the camera, dominate it, and tell the folks, all my 13 viewers,
All right. Oh, so,
who you are.
thank you. Ross Terrio, former state rep, former school board member, and former alderman for Ward 7. Have a lot of experience in government. Well, all right, thank you. And I guess, you know, the big thing that I did is I was always returned phone calls, always returned to emails. Didn't always give people the answer they wanted to hear, but I always made an effort on everybody's behalf. Worked hard. Respected the tax cap, and you know, just put a lot of effort into being an alderman.
But before, how many years were you on the school board for Ward 7 before you were an alderman?
6 years, so 3 years on the school board.
3 terms on the school board, then you won alderman, and then you lost a real squeaker of an election.
8 votes to Alderman Heath, Mary Heath.
And that is Mary Heath going to be your, what would you call it, opponent this time?
I'm going into this thinking she's going to run again, but I've heard, and I don't know how credible this is, that she might not run again, but who knows?
Would it change your
No, I'm
attack?
Gonna run, no, I'm going to run no matter what.
You brought up about the tax cap,
Yes, sir.
which, according to Joe Kelly Lavasser, is a revenue cap, because he voted to override it twice, I think.
Well, there's 2 parts. There's
Right.
how much you can take in and how much you can put out and spend.
But, you know, we talk about the tax cap, and what do you think inflation is going to do to property taxes, and
I already
how
know.
does one cope with that?
You know, so I bought my house back in 2000 for about 125,000. I think my last assessment was close to 290 or something like that. So my property has more than doubled, the value of my property. My taxes now are pushing close to 5,000 a year.
That's not an unusual
Oh no,
number.
no, it's
for
not for
any
New Hampshire.
house.
That's great, but you know, It's definitely his. Here's the thing, and somebody, a mutual friend of ours, we were talking about taxes online. They said, "Oh, you're doing great. Your house has gone up more than double in value. I can't spend that money. I'm going to be taxed on that value, but it's not like I could take out an equity loan, but then I would just lose equity in my house. So really, the only time I'm going to benefit from the value of my house is when I sell it
Right.
finally. But until that time, it going up in value actually hurts me because now I have to pay more in taxes.
But with the inflation rate going up, that means that the tax cap, essentially, there's going to be a raise in taxes no matter what. Because what is the tax cap exactly?
So
How
the
is the
tax
formula?
cap looks at the CPI, so the Consumer Price Index, which is a basket of goods and
Right.
services, movie tickets, gasoline, whatever, airline tickets, all these. It looks at all these different things in the country. How much have they gone up? It averages it out and says, so the rate of inflation or healthcare costs, it might say 4% or 5%. What the tax cap does is it takes 3 years, it looks back the last 3 years, because they don't want to have spikes up and
Right.
down. And it takes the average of 3 years, it averages those 3 years, and that's what it says our taxes can go up by X amount, which is 1%, 3%, 4%.
Yeah, one of the things that people on your side of the aisle, Republicans, would have talked about is that the city right now, Manchester, and every city in America has received a bounty of federal funding as COVID relief or money,
Yes.
and that has enabled a lot of spending. Now, what's going to happen when that federal money runs out, if it indeed does?
It's one of two things. Either you're going to make it up locally, either from state or local taxes, or you're going to have to cut the budget. So there's going to be some pain coming up very soon.
There hasn't been budget cuts since the Gatsas years.
So yeah, we're in for a rough road ahead.
Well, things such, I remember, and I'm saying this in a nonpartisan fashion, though, with Gatsas and his budgets, he wouldn't fully fund the positions in the police department, and according to the firemen's union, like when Jim Burkish, but this was when Jim Burkish was chief, so I guess he wasn't technically a member of the union. He's probably in the union. I'm not quite sure. They had quite a battle royal over positions for firefighters. But one of the things that always puzzled me about Gatsas is that he wouldn't go for federal money, which would only have given him like 3 firefighters more. But
I think what's the problem? And recently I was
this is a thing
similar. Is there was I don't know if it's a homeless coordinator or something, but the money is now running out, and they're like, you're going to have to pay the person's salary. I think it was it the homeless coordinator that the federal money has run out? I saw this recently in the news.
possibly that's a question.
There was a position that's the money has run out, and now Manchester either has to get rid of that person or now fund it.
Well, we're going to bring it up a little later about the position now. I think of Mayor Craig is to, or I don't follow the things as closely as I did, is to create a department, an actual department dealing with homeless issues, and to get rid of the senior services department, which it's not saying that they're both related.
Seems like a bad idea. So they're not going to have senior services anymore? That doesn't make
Well,
sense.
the senior services department was always moribund. There was a director, and she was very controversial. She caused lots of trouble over there. I mean, she had people arrested who complained about things, and it was Bill Cashin himself had to step in because that's who the people went to.
I like Bill Cashin. Good guy.
Because of his reputation, people went to him, and they had a lot of the seniors had trouble with the senior services director, and I was rather surprised because I wasn't following it so closely. Is that there hasn't been a replacement for her, and she's been gone for over a year. And Mayor Craig said they can't find somebody to fill the position. What the proposal is is to fold the senior center into the health department.
Oh, so there'll still be somebody providing services that just
Right.
the health. Oh, okay, that
You
makes
have to remember the
sense.
senior services center is like a hybrid.
Yeah.
And I've talked to the city clerk, and it's like sometimes they really don't know what to do with it. Ted Gatzis didn't really know what to do with it, and Joyce had her problems because it's funded privately, by the Friends of the Cashin Center.
Wow.
That's when they have like they raise money. So it's kind of like a hybrid. And
So that makes sense. So have the health department. Initially I was like, I thought they meant get away with, get
Right.
rid of it. But if the health department runs it, okay, that makes sense.
Well, it's going to be an issue that has to be navigated because, first of all, you do have the private foundation that they pay for the maintenance of the building. I believe, I'd have to find out. Maybe you can come back, we can talk about this because senior issues are very important to me. And
you are
the
senior.
city, it is a city building, I believe, but the maintenance is paid for by the Friends of the Cashin Center. And in the last year, it's become a warming center for the homeless.
I thought didn't they have some problems and didn't that end? I thought.
Well, Bill Cashin's great nephew
Ryan?
is Ryan Cashin is
My
his
neighbor.
brother's grandson, and he vowed to take care of the center because it was his great uncle's name is on it, and that was one of Bill's big things. And a lot of seniors are afraid because of COVID, because they're a very vulnerable population.
I think they're also
And
afraid
they-
of the homeless people too.
Yes, but there was the thing Cashin. I have pictures on my phone. We could actually do a show about that because I think senior issues are ignored a lot by people nowadays and politicians. Where once they were talked about, and it was a major issue. Maybe it's just here. I don't see a great focus on it. But yeah, it just could be the times because like homelessness has become such a big issue. But what Chief Cashin did was he had I don't know what you call a sanitation station. In the Army, they'd call it a delousing station. They would call it the Marine Corps because you bring the Marines back or you have prisoners or whatever. You put them through into a building where you're not, in the old days they'd use gas that you'd go through, not
powder,
to kill
yeah.
you,
Yeah,
or a
yeah.
powder type thing. And every one of the homeless had a 5-gallon bucket, and they had to put all their stuff in there, and they all had to be decontaminated themselves, and it was very closely watched by the fire department, and people that were at the senior center, part of the Friends, who've been very involved, and this is their baby, were impressed by what happened. I didn't hear anything negative about that because there was rumors like somebody OD'd.
Yeah, I heard about
but
that.
That didn't,
That didn't
that's not
happen?
true. That's not true. And I don't know what rumor monger said really, but you know how rumors are;
Yeah.
they just start. But there is the proposal now for a homeless department. And now that you told me about the funding running out, federal funding, maybe they're shifting towards the city funding. So that is like, I have a whole page, because I was going to give these to my different co-hosts to ask you questions. But homelessness, is that the number one issue facing Manchester now?
I don't think so.
Why do you say
I think
that?
it gets everybody's attention,
Right.
Because they see the homeless and they get upset. But I don't. If you look at the demographics of our homeless population, a large number of them aren't even Manchester residents. Now, and I don't want to seem like I'm insensitive to the issue, but I think the important thing is keeping Manchester residents from becoming homeless. But what's happening is, this is well known, other communities in New Hampshire are dumping people on us. There was Carol Robideau from the Manchester
Right.
Inklink wrote an article a few years ago. Carol's a wonderful person. She did a story on a man he was from the Lakes region, terminally alcoholic, dying of cancer, from a small town. They said, well, we can't do anything for you. He's poor. He said they gave him a bus ticket or whatever, or drove him down to Manchester. They just dumped him right on Manchester. Or we had a situation a few months ago, you probably remember this, where a police force I think in Maine, in southern Maine, drove a homeless person to Manchester and dropped them off. Mayor Craig was outraged. But that's been going on. So we're a magnet.
Yeah, Joe Lavasser talked about 8 years ago that southern Maine, northern New Hampshire, even Massachusetts, but not so much Massachusetts, but Maine, sends people to Manchester with bus tickets. And I was listening to him, and I tried to do some outreach with homeless veterans. This was 8-9 years ago. But then you find out not only do they have a drug problem, but they're dealing. And I didn't want to
or they have mental
near
illness.
that. But they be from places like Maine and stuff. Joe was right about that. And one of the major issues, and one thing that the board has to deal with, and is the fact that the county jail, this is the most populous county in New Hampshire. Was it 450,000 people? Because you've got Nashua, which is almost 90. We got 115, and some people say it's up to 130 when you count all the undocumented folks and homeless people and transients. But we have the county jail, and they get sent there. And when they're released,
they have nowhere to go.
There's nowhere to go. No, I was at Jim Burkish, Ward 8, a ward meeting.
Ward 9.
Ward 9, excuse me, Ward 9. I'm in Ward 8. I'm in Ward 9. And he had people from the police and the fire department. Chief Cashin was there, and they were talking about it. There have been proposals. There was a Republican, a young kid, a Republican state rep there, who was working.
Ross Berry?
Yeah, Ross Berry,
Great
cashless
guy.
bail.
Very well versed and knowledgeable.
Yeah. And what he says, I don't think of it as ideological. He's just talking, to the situation as it is, like Republicans used to do.
Let's talk
But I just
about
want to say,
bail.
the problem is and Burkish, and they were talking about, there were proposals like, well, you have to come and pick, like Bedford or Peterborough or Nashua. You come and pick your people up. But the ACLU said no, because that would be still detention. But the most important thing, what Ross Berry said, is nobody wants to come and bring them back to their town. So what you're having to deal with is that, yes, the whole state dumps people here, and the state does not do as much as other states would do, because every state's like that. Like people get dumped in New York, L.A., or San Francisco.
And not only that, so let's say we successfully, and it's almost like a vicious circle or a catch-22. Let's say we successfully reduced homelessness, to in a perfect world, to nothing or to very little. All it's going to do is what many people are afraid of.
To be a magnet.
A magnet. So then they're like, shoot, Manchester doesn't have any homeless. And I have these homeless people, or these people that can't, they're struggling to get by. Let's send them to Manchester. So, Mayor Craig has mentioned it, and other people have mentioned it, is that when you're successful against homelessness, it's like a pie eating contest. Your prize is more pie.
It's true.
You're going to get more homelessness. So
right.
It's kind of a vicious cycle, a catch-22.
All the services that you provide for the homeless to try to tackle it makes it an environment that's going to attract homeless people. I mean, going back to Ted Gatzis, he touted the Safe Station program, and we'll get back to that. And he said, during a press conference or a press release, a mother in California sent her kid to Manchester. Joe Lavasser didn't like that. Turned out that wasn't true, but there were people from
other
states coming here,
yes.
And because it became a story picked up by national news and that, so Ted was proud of it. That was Captain Hickey's program, Safe Station.
Dan Goonan.
Well, Dan Goonan championed it as assistant chief, but it was Hickey that came up with the idea.
I don't know if Starwatt, the guy that was in charge of the ambulance, I don't know if he was involved.
And Goonan, too, they championed it. And, so he was proud of that, but then you start realizing you're attracting people. Mm-hmm. So what would you do? You can give a capsule.
On safe
homeless
stations?
First off, Yeah, let's go safe station. What do you say about safe station?
Well, we got rid of safe stations, and that
Right.
kind of
That's right. It's
burned me a
gone
little
now.
bit because here's the thing. I thought safe stations was a bad idea. We had the state was also doing something similar called the Doorways program.
Right.
So during the throes of COVID, when we were doing safe stations, I was volunteering. Well, I was working part time for the state, vaccinating people, and I was vaccinating people not only in Manchester over at the SNU college, but I was also vaccinating people in Nashua. And I was talking to the Nashua Fire Department because the fire department was heavily involved,
Right.
as was the National Guard, in vaccinating people for COVID. And I would talk to the Nashua firefighters, and they said it was too much of it was using up all our resources, and so the reason why I got the idea, because I was an alderman at the time, the National Firefighter said, we switched over to the Doorways program, so now the state personnel are administering, it's their money, it took a lot of burden off of us. So I said, we should do that here. So I was kind of pilloried in social media, I was given a hard time. You can't do that. And I said, I don't want to end these services completely. I just don't want the city providing them. I want the state to provide them. Anyways, I was beaten up for it. The next year, when I was leaving, so they put up to a vote. I lost the vote. Everybody, said, "Oh, this is a bad idea. What you're doing is bad. People are going to die." But the next year, when we got a new chief, it was an election year also. The new chief got rid of safe stations. There was no vote. It just went away quietly. And
This was the one between Goonan and Cashin.
No, French name. I can picture the guy, Andy. What's his last name?
I cannot remember.
I
his
can remember.
name.
He had shaved head, mustache, nice
Right.
guy, Andy.
Oh, we don't need the name.
It doesn't matter. Anyways,
Yep.
that fire chief got rid of safe stations and transitioned over to the Doorways program, which I had asked to do the year before and got beaten up for, and now that's what we're doing. The Doorways. So the service is still being provided. It's just that the city of Manchester Fire Department's not providing. The other thing is too, and I know Chief Goonan got upset with me over this, and I like Dan. I have no problems personally with Dan, but I talk to a lot of firefighters. I talk to a lot of people, and I like to get people's opinions. So I don't say, hey, Joe Smith said this or Mary Jones said this, but I talk to a lot of people off the record and say, what's your opinion of such and such? And I talk to a lot of the firefighters, the rank and file that are in,
Right.
especially downtown, the Central Firehouse 3, I think it is.
Station.
It's 3. Talking to a guy down there, although I think typically the firefighter is supposed to be like 1 day on and 1 day off or whatever, 1 day on, 2 days off, whatever their schedule is. This guy was working typically 2 days and then so many days off. And he said, I don't get any sleep with safe stations. Because what was happening was they're always coming to the firehouse at all hours of the day. So let's say they don't have any money for heroin or whatever. They're withdrawing.
Yeah.
It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, they're going to go to the fire station and they're going to knock on the door and they're going to want services. And so he said between all the medical calls and all the safe stations, he goes, I get maybe an hour of sleep at a time. He goes, I'm just not sleeping. So a lot of the firefighters didn't particularly care for the program.
Well, the Concord Fire Department, the rank and file and the chief, they were against it. I don't know what happened.
It makes more. Here's the thing: our fire department, our firefighters are overburdened. At one time, and I might have my numbers wrong, we had a fire complement of up in the 200s. Of firefighters.
258.
Max. Now we're down to like 185 or
Really?
something. We're way low.
A lot of those guys must have retired.
So we have so few so it's the city's getting bigger, they need more services.
Yeah.
And yet we have many fewer firefighters. So another reason why I thought safe stations was bad is you're giving them another duty to do. All these health calls, all these, the medical calls, all the safe station calls, we're overburdening them. When you go from 258 down to the high 100s, wherever it is now, it's just too much. So, it makes more sense to transfer that service to the state, have the state Doorways program do it, so that our firefighters aren't overwhelmed, which they already are.
Okay, in Manchester, the head of emergency services is the fire chief. Now,
I thought the guy named Star was.
I thought there was the.
You could be right, but I know for some reason there's a guy named, his last
You
name
probably
is
know better
Sawise,
than I do.
and he's very high up, and I know he's in medical services and all that, but I could be wrong as far as the
It could be,
hierarchy,
yeah,
the
there could be like
structure.
hierarchy. What is what? What is what technically?
Mm.
But would you support the creation of a homeless department?
We already have one.
No, a
So
department of
we-
homeless people with a director that would be paid in the mid 90K,
No,
90,000.
so we voted. I voted when I was an alderman. I voted for a homeless coordinator or whatever.
Right, but
technically.
this is not a department head.
No, I think what I would do would make more sense is to put it in the health department. I think it
Along with
makes
seniors too.
Yep, and give them the staff that they need. But I don't think a department just for homelessness, I don't think is necessary.
That vote was going to be taken though before you get on the board, I believe.
Probably, yeah. I think
Yeah.
wasn't there a vote just recently?
I have to say, shamefully, I did not watch the last meeting. I basically follow stuff by Carol Robideau and Manchester Inkling, the good reporting of her and Andy Sylvia.
But and I like Andy. He's a good guy. The other thing I want to talk about. So we talked about being a magnet, but separate from that, the other. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but like people like James Mayo in Ward 7, great guy. He's been a champion of more housing. You need more housing. This city needs more. We need
The whole United States needs more
But
housing.
Manchester
Ross.
definitely needs high
High density.
high density. You know, small apartments that'll fit one or two people. We need high density housing, affordable. And if you, and not to oversimplify, I know it's a problem. That's why they call problems, because they're not easy to fix. But a big part of the solution is more high density housing in the city. And,
Where would you put it in Ward 7?
yeah. It'd be better. I mean, Ward 7's funny because you got the western part of the ward, which is an inner city ward. You have all
Yes.
multifamily,
Yeah.
and then the eastern part of the ward
Is suburbia.
suburban. It's like big
Suburbia,
yards
yeah.
and suburbia. But the western side is an inner city, very dense housing.
Well, how they handled the housed homeless people in old days was what they called single room only. They used to call them hotels. They used to have them in every city.
Rooming houses.
Rooming houses.
Hostels,
Single, but they call it
yeah.
SRO, not a hostel. That's for like kids and travelers.
Yeah.
But it'd be a single room with a common bathroom. That was how people in a low income were able to be housed, because the poet Charles Bukowski, the poet laureate of L.A. Skid Row, always said the one thing you need is four walls around you. They can be terrible walls, because he lived in shacks and rooms, but being out, on the row, would just destroy you. And right, but there was a big thing that they just disappeared in the 80s, 90s. Yeah, because people would take the buildings, turn them into apartments, upgrade them, and that. But
Gentrification. I can remember, I'm originally from Massachusetts. We used to go into the south end
Oh, yeah.
of Boston. Now, South End was a tough area.
Tough
my dad
mix.
used to bring me in. There was the Massachusetts School of Barbers. So it was 6 kids. So my dad couldn't, we were a middle class family. He couldn't afford to spend a lot on haircuts because he had 6 kids to have their haircut. So we would go into, and I remember the train was overhead. It was an elevated train. It was a predominantly African American section of town. It was a poor section.
oh,
of
the
town.
South End. I was thinking of Southie. I forget about
Oh
South
no, not
End.
South. No, the South End of Boston.
Right, yeah.
South
End.
But anyways, we'd go in, and he would get our haircuts at the Mass School. So basically, you'd have a student, and a lot of times,
Yeah.
sometimes they'd mess up your hair, but it was so cheap, my dad didn't care.
And you were a kid.
Yeah,
you
we
have
were
to
a kid.
live with it.
But anyways, the thing I want to say is, so the South End used to be affordable apartments, but then
Right.
it gentrified.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Now, so the South End is no longer predominantly African American. I don't believe it's predominantly
Right,
African American.
yeah.
So people moved in, bought these
For a
apartments
song.
and houses
they buy a whole townhouse.
and they'd fix them up, and now it's completely different. I have relatives that live in Somerville, Winter Hill.
Somerville-
Whitey and the Winter Hill gang. That,
Somerville, I spent a summer there in a triple decker, and it was working class Irish, Poles,
Yep.
and Italians.
So-
and then it's all
So my
the price of one of
my
those
in-laws are
triple deckers.
Latino.
I can't believe it.
They bought an old 3-family, which
There's a
back
lot
in
of
the day-
Brazilians now in
Yeah,
Somerville.
Brazilians in
Right.
Somerville and Latino
Yeah.
people, And they bought a three-family years and years ago for $500,000. It's probably worth $1 million
Over a
more.
million, yeah.
Yeah,
Those are
it's
worth
amazing.
$1 million now.
But if you go, it's a working-class neighborhood. It's all three families. There's no yard. There's a postage
Yeah.
stamp, and yet it's $1.5 million for a three-family.
Right.
You know, same type of three-family, the flat roof three families that you
Oh,
have
yeah,
here.
triple decker.
And it's just amazing that how housing is unaffordable now. Anyway, so long story short, we need lots and lots of units of high density housing. And whatever we can do to make that happen has to happen.
What's another big issue that
The
you
schools.
believe
So although the schools are getting smaller and smaller, you know, the student population is going down. Are just
Okay, you were on the school board. I actually wrote one out. I was going to
Sure,
give it
ask
to
me.
Mikey. You have all the experience on the school board. Then you were an alderman. So what does the alderman do when it comes to the schools? Is it just limited to approving a budget?
pretty much, yeah. So
There's nothing proactive aldermen can really
there's some
do?
collaborative. So they have a couple of committees. They have a committee on
Right, there's a joint committee.
on buildings. So
Yeah.
So the school buildings actually belong to the city. So when the school board wants to fix them up or dispose of them or what have you, the aldermen have to be involved, and they had a joint committee. And then there's one on education, and I apologize if I forget, that was other non-building matters. But for the most part, the school board has a lot of, although it's not completely autonomous, they make their budget, they run their schools, but because of the way our government's structured in the city, they have to get a budget approval
But from the board of
from the
aldermen.
board of. So that's their main. So although they do have two committees, one on education, one on school buildings, joint with the aldermen, the main thing that the aldermen do is just approve the budget or don't. I mean, I don't know. I can't imagine they ever outright reject a school budget.
Right, but there's nothing you guys when you're on the board, when you move from the school board where you are responsible for the policies of the school. When you move over to the alderman, you don't have responsibility for the school policy.
As it should be. I mean, the school board should be responsible for their own policies.
Right, and this is a system that goes back from New England, goes back to the 18th century, where the school board was were always elected boards.
And now my friend Arthur Beaudry, you remember Arthur Beaudry?
Oh yeah.
The dean of the school board. He's
There for
actually
many
living out.
years.
He moved with his to be
Ward
close to
7,
his
yeah.
granddaughters. He was 9.
Oh, he was Ward 9?
Yeah, he lived on
That's right,
Bay
that's
Street
right.
down near Brown Ave, right near the highway.
I always mix. I know my part of 8. Then I'm always surprised that
But Art was a
7's
great
here
guy.
and over there and 9's here, and then there's the thing that goes down to Litchfield. That's 9.
But he's out on the main board now. He's still in New Hampshire. He moved to be close to his grandkids.
Yeah,
But
well,
Arthur, I believe Arthur started this. They started doing multiple budgets from the school board. They did like a tax cap
compliant.
budget, and then a
Like a mayor's budget,
like
yeah.
a wish list budget.
Yeah.
And they might even had one in between. But they'd always in the last. I think Arthur started. I could be wrong, but I think Arthur Beaudry started this. Was doing multiple budgets. A tax cap budget,
Yeah.
and then like a wish list, and say, we'd like to have this, 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 and this.
Okay, let's talk about city politics.
Dr. Mayor's race, handicap it.
Right. I've never heard of the Republican candidate in my life. Is it Juan? How do you pronounce his last name?
Jay Rouet.
Rouet?
Yeah, so he was, I believe he was chief of staff for Ginta.
Down in Washington?
Down in Washington, I
But
believe.
not here in Manchester.
He might have been here in Manchester, too.
Is
he
he
actually lives,
from
strangely enough, I like Jay.
Is he actually from Manchester?
That I don't know, but I know he lives in Ward 7. The reason why I met Jay accidentally, when I was running for alderman or school board, knocked on his door. Married to a beautiful Latino woman also, like myself. Great guy. He is a lieutenant in the Army National Guard, I believe, in the infantry. But he doesn't have the name recognition. He doesn't have the political experience as far as being an elected official, but he has the political experience as far as working as a chief of staff for Ginta.
But this is a person who has never spoken at any meeting of the school board, the board of aldermen, and has never taken a single position in the 10 years I've covered politics. I mean, he comes from
That I
nowhere.
don't know.
I've never seen he. I could troll the transcripts. He's never been in front of the board. You know, one thing I like to make fun of Victoria Sullivan, but she's always there,
Yeah.
and she's always at it. Or Rich Gerard, you know
Yeah.
how I feel about him, but he goes to the meetings and
Although
he knows his
I
stuff.
like Rich. Rich has a strong personality. I like Victoria too. She has a
Strong. You're like rotting fish.
strong personality. I like Victoria and Rich, but sometimes they rub people the wrong way, maybe, and people don't know them personally. But
If Rich
but
Gerard-
they're not running, so I mean they're out of the race.
Right, because the money, the Republicans threw the money behind this guy who we hear is Kelly Ayotte, the person.
What do you mean,
Ke-
Kelly Ott?
Kelly Ayotte wants somebody in the
I see.
mayor's office in Manchester because she's thinking of running for governor.
Oh, that'd be
Because
that'd be
Sununu
great.
is,
Well, allegedly Joyce is thinking about running for governor too.
maybe,
But that would be Clash of the Titans, Kelly versus Joyce. A very contrasting personalities and styles. I'd love to see that.
But
then we could say the next governor is going to be a female.
I don't know.
But so
You can never tell. But let's go to the Democrats.
Well,
now.
yeah. So
you can
so
come
Rich
back
is out of
whenever
it.
you wanna.
Victoria's out of it. And again, I like both of them. But Jay's in there. I like Jay. But again, he doesn't have the name recognition. But so we have the two announced, one most likely to run.
Okay, we have
Will.
June Triciani,
Yep.
who you didn't serve on the board with, and you've got Will Stewart.
Yes.
But there
And
is
Kevin,
a potential third candidate, according to Joe Kelly Lavasser and other sources.
And what's her name? Kathy Sullivan wrote an article that in her article she wrote that she thinks that Kevin is
Kevin
gonna run.
Kavanaugh, Ward
Unofficially
1,
is thinking about running.
Alderman, is thinking of running for
So
mayor.
let's handicap it. So I think if Kevin announced, he would be the strongest. He would win.
I think he would
Now,
win the mayor.
I don't
He'd
know-
become mayor.
So here's my thing. I
See-
don't think June has only served one term as an alderman. I know she's been on some boards like zoning or
Right, but she's one term as an
One
alderman.
term-
at
well,
large.
she hasn't even
She's
finished
only
her
had
first term.
one election, but Bob
two
Baines.
elections. No, she lost her state senate run too.
But we're talking about the city now.
oh, okay.
But Bob Baines was elected without ever being elected to an
Well,
office.
here's the thing. So Bob Baines didn't have.
We only got like
political
a few
But he
minutes.
yeah. But he was well known. He was the
Right.
many years the
Head of West
principal of
High,
West, so
principal
he
of
was
West
well
High.
known. I don't
and
think
the
so I don't
teachers
think-
worked for him.
I don't think June has the name recognition, and I don't think June is going to win. Although she's good at raising money. I like Will, good guy. Again, he has more experience, but I really have to think that Kevin, when we look at it all together, his union background, the unions love him. I think that Kevin is probably the strongest candidate on the Democratic side, and if Kevin Kavanaugh runs, I think Kevin Kavanaugh is going to be
The next
the
mayor of
nominee.
Manchester.
Yeah, most likely the next mayor of Manchester.
What it tells me that we're talking about Kevin Kavanaugh, who is a business agent for his union.
Business
He
agent or
was.
president? I thought he was the president of the union.
Well, he was a business agent before. He's probably
Okay.
became president. And he's a vote getter. I always laugh with about. I've known him since his first run, and I always laugh about how much votes he gets.
Yeah.
But he's a vote getter. But what it tells
and
me,
he lives in Ward 1, which is
Right.
the most.
right?
Yeah, I mean,
and
he's just-
June is from Ward 1, and
He's
Will's
just
from
going to
Ward
come
2.
out. If Kevin's the nominee, he's going to come out of Ward 1 with just a ton of votes.
But here's what it's telling me that this is being floated: the unions won't back either June or Will.
I'm surprised because I think they would both be, friendly to the unions. I'm surprised that they wouldn't.
Well, Will has his Chamber of Commerce background, and that's traditionally, considered Republicanish, if not downright Republican.
And, I know
I
Will
used to hear
pretty
Bill
well.
Passion bitching about the Chamber of Commerce all the time.
I don't know
He's
June
still
that
mad
well,
at
but I would think that they'd get along with pretty
Right,
much all
if
the
he's-
Democratic constituencies.
But right now, they
Kevin-
want to back. I want to back a traditional Democrat.
Well, that'll be
See,
Kevin.
Joyce Craig is part of the Craig clan.
But I think Joyce is probably going to support June because I know June and Joyce are friends.
But Kevin Kavanaugh and Joyce are very, very close.
But if I had to bet on it, if I was a betting man, and I am, I would put my money on Kevin to win.
I'd say that if Kevin announces he'll be, June will have to switch. They'll have to switch back to their races because they're not going to beat him. June will have to go back to Alderman at large, and Will.
But that would be
too.
embarrassing to announce that you're running for mayor and then say somebody else
But do you
comes out.
get whipped?
I mean, then you.
What people were saying beforehand, well, Joyce took a long time to decide, because I know certain people that were running for mayor were bitching about it, but not the ones we're talking about, by the way, and not Glenn either. But
Is Glenn going to run again?
it depends on who can give him the $100. But people were saying rank and file Democrats were saying, yes, Glenn's running again. We just got the notice. Rank and file Democrats say, why can't we should just decide on one, get behind one. But, ambition is ambition. But if Kevin Kavanaugh comes out, that's June's not going.
He's an elephant in the room.
I'd say June was the favorite, but Kevin is he'll be the next mayor. It's his for the asking. And I think one of the reasons Joyce is, it's a thankless job. And Rich Girard, for all the criticism, really knows city politics. And he was saying it's a thankless job, and it's good to get out at 3 terms because Ted almost 64 votes in a recount with Joyce, and it's time to go. 3's enough. But any last words? You have a minute. Address the camera.
No, just again, Ross Terrio. I'll be running for Ward 7 this November. The Alderman.
Tell the camera, man. I know how charming I am with this beard, but.
And
start again.
Ross Terrio, Ward 7. I'll be running for Alderman this November, and I hope to get your vote. Now, I will be walking the wards and passing out my literature and talking to everybody. As I always do, I walk every street in my ward, every election.
You have to, at least, and do it twice. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week here at Ward 13.